Well, I've got to say thank you for your patience and persistence. I don't know how you do it, but you're certainly an example to us all on how to not give up on somebody. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Someone I've been having an ongoing dialogue with is a baptismal regenerationist, and he uses Acts 2:38 obviously as proof that we must be baptized to receive forgiveness of sins.
Okay, really quickly, is this a person, a Church of Christ individual?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I want to distinguish for everybody listening. Mm-hmm. Baptismal regeneration positions will differ in their biblical argumentation and what they think actually is accomplished depending on what their denominational background is. Sounds like old style, probably no hymns, Church of Christ type guy who's just simply going to camp on Acts 2:38 and repeat it ad nauseum for 4 days, which is what most of those guys do. That approach is very different than what you're going to get from a Roman Catholic who does believe in baptismal regeneration, but in a sacramental sense that the Church of Christ guy, no way, or certain Lutherans who you would think with justification by faith would not believe in baptismal regeneration, but Luther was Luther and had the concept of infantile faith and the whole nine yards. So there's a bunch of different perspectives, and that's why I need to find out which one was which, so we know what we're dealing with.
Yep. I'll ask. Yeah. So from the Acts 2:38 passage, he then takes that passage and literally reads in literal water baptism into every passage that uses the word baptism or washing.
Right.
Never mind, he dismisses the true definition of the word baptism as immersed into not just water, but person or work, etc. But his spin on it is that it's an act of obedience, but that it's namely a work of God, not a work of man. And he references Colossians 2:12.
That's an interesting way of doing it.
Yeah, having been buried with him in baptism, in which you were also raised up with him through the faith in the working of God who raises him from the dead. Mm-hmm. But my response to this is, in Acts 2:38, it says that what must we do, not what must God do.
Right.
And if baptism were something that is a work of God, solely a work of God, then why doesn't it passively happen to us like faith? But I've tried to find some good books on baptismal regeneration, like Believer's Baptism by Schreiner and Wright. But I find that most deal with, like you were saying, paedobaptism or believer's baptism, like paedo versus believer's baptism, or the Catholic paedobaptism regeneration versus believer's baptism. But there's always a spin and argumentation against Presbyterianism or Catholicism or Lutheranism. But do you know of any that are straight up against adult baptismal regeneration that handles all of the passages that reference baptism by chance?
Off the top of my head, no. And one of the reasons for that is that when I wrote something on this years and years ago, my primary approach on it was to sort of undercut the entire argument by starting with anthropology and the deadness of man and sin. I mean, that may not work with this fellow, but I think as far as...
He also doesn't necessarily believe in the fall per se. I know...
In the fall?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's out there stuff.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you're like pretty much full on Pelagianism at that point.
It's I think you touched on him several years ago, F. LaGard Smith.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's a Church of Christer. I don't know if you knew that.
Yes, I did know that. I didn't know that he was sort of the really old style stick in the mud type. But okay, well, that's interesting. Yeah, to be honest with you, from my perspective, I have yet to see progress made in an argument on baptismal regeneration that did not start with a necessary anthropology in regards to the deadness of man and sin. I just, as long as you don't have that, in other words, if you're importing into your reading of the text an unbiblical view of the capacities of man, you're going to be spinning your wheels forever. I just don't see how you're going to get anywhere. There are certain subjects that require preceding elements of divine truth for you to be able to make any sense, any headway. And I think this is one of them. I really do, because baptism represents something, and if you don't have a clear view of what it's representing, then you can read almost anything you want into it. And at that point, if I were to have a discussion with F. LaGard Smith, that's what I would be focused upon.
Okay, perfect. What was the book you wrote years ago?
Oh, no, it wasn't a book I wrote. It was actually, if you look up Baptismal Regeneration in the, what did we call those old files? Legacy? Vintage. Yeah, it's in the vintage. It should actually come up in a Google search, the Google thingy at the bottom of the AOMN webpage.
Okay, a brief rebuttal of baptismal regeneration.
Yep.
Gotcha. Okay, I got it.